Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories and the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by. We are back with the Andrews, Andrew Navaro and Andrew Fisher, representing Earthborne Games. Last week, we talked about Earthborne Rangers, their first game, which is live on Kickstarter right now as we speak, as I'm releasing the episode on the 11th of August. So you can go ahead and check out the Kickstarter page for that. This discussion is centered on the company. So if people want to support the company, I think it has some pretty interesting values, and we get into some of the nitty gritty on what sustainability means, localized production means, all that great stuff. A very interesting conversation. I'm happy to present part 2 for you right now.
More than welcome to.
Thank you so much. So we're going to end off by talking about Earthborne games, right, in a larger kind of context. So, and I'm going to do it in the context of like, how I do in my Good Trouble series. In my Good Trouble series, we talk about the social issues. We don't just talk about it kind of like game specific. We're in a context here. And the context is a burning planet.
Yeah.
The context is a lot more and more anxiety about like where we're going as a society. And it comes up in forums, like it comes up, should we get stuff shipped in from China? Should we, our legacy games, environmentally friendly because they're disposable? Like there's like, it's in the back of gamers' minds. I have a shelf of cardboard. Is this good for the environment? Right. And it's not something that I do on my channel all the time because I'm more devoted to like culture and diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. But, I'm open to it because inclusion, as I wrote to Andrew, inclusion has to include Mother Earth or it's not inclusion. Right. And we haven't, point blank, we haven't as a culture, as a society, as a gaming industry, we haven't included quote unquote Mother Earth as real, a real thing. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Earthborne games and just the high level of, that big S word, sustainability, talking about how that plays in.
Yeah. So the two pillars of Earthborne games, like I talked about earlier when you got me going and all worked up about narrative and changing the stories that we tell. That's a big part of it, where I want to like try to create stories that
creativity,
that not creativity. I think that's too bland of an approach because everyone says, "Oh yeah, we're creative." It's more about changing the discussions, changing the narratives, and really like trying to approach stories with empathy and compassion, and creating situations again where there aren't like people who are just labeled as villains or labeled as evil, where you are then given free license to just go and kill them at will.
Shifting the creativity paradigm.
Yes, sure. So that's one of the pillars. The other is the environmental sustainability, and trying to make our games and produce them as sustainably as possible. And to me, that comes down to where the game is manufactured, how, by whom, how the materials for it are sourced, like what those suppliers do, what their practices are. And then hopefully, and this is like the probably the most meaningful but also the least sexy stretch goal of all time, which is regional manufacturing, which to me is like something that I've really wanted to do for over a decade, at least being able to manufacture in the States and not have to ship everything from China, not only for reasons of environmental sustainability, but also just logistically and practically. I think it's a much, I don't know. To me, like having something close to home is much easier for me to deal with than having to work with a factory on the other side of the world and then put it on a boat and then cross your fingers and hopefully it gets here in less than 5 months.
You shared an anecdote on the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast, which I very much recommend. Very great. I think it was Matt that ran the interview.
Yep.
And he shared an anecdote about I think it was Games Workshop, where they had some of that stuff, like they produced plastics and they produced, the fulfillment was right there. And like I think I forget if it was Asmodee or somebody else where fulfillment was like there. Like go in the factory, the boxes are all right there.
Yeah, that's Games Workshop. Yep.
Games Workshop. So like, and that's something that we're not used to. Like we're like, our modern society has prioritized just do it in the cheapest place possible and then like connect it with supply lines.
Right.
And like what this is not that. Like this is like, okay, it's almost like, locally sourced food. So it's
Exactly.
like, get your food like at the grocer, at the farmer down the street, not the, giant agro thing in the middle of nowhere. So like, that's what you're talking about in terms of like a very practical, everything is like, I can go to this next office and I can see where all my games are. I can go to this next office.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So it's so hopefully, and it's a little bit more challenging in the States from what I can tell so far to be able to source everything in the States or source everything on the continent.
So
Um,
could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think there's a movement now because of all the shipping problems from China.
yeah,
Why can't we print it here? Why can't we print it here?
we we can print it here. It's just more expensive. You just make less money. And I think, that's to your point. You mean, you just said it, like the companies, especially large companies, with shareholders, stakeholders, where the idea behind a corporation is to create value for your shareholders.
Yep.
The way to do that is to make your costs of goods, if you have goods, as low as possible. Pay your employees as little as possible. Expend as little as possible so that the few people who own stake in the company can make as much money as they possibly can. And if I sound like irritated by that, I am. And part of
This is true, people. Like, this isn't just like social justice-y. Like,
no,
you
it's
ask them,
facts.
and
Yeah.
they will tell you. No,
Yeah.
the point of us is to maximize value for our shareholders.
Yeah,
That's like part of the deal.
it's in their mission statement. It's right there. So it's not like it's like a thing that's like, like I'm like I'm speaking something crazy. You're totally right.
We're not twisting interpretation. Like they'll tell you.
Exactly. That's just how business has been done for many, many years. So part of what I wanted to do, is in forming my own business, is being able to, not make decisions like that. So I'm not making decisions to make the most amount of money. Far from it. Like, if I had come out with my new company and I would have said, hey, we're going to do like an FFG style thing. We're going to do like these big, gorgeous, gigantic board games with lots of plastic miniatures and blah, 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 blah. No one would have been surprised, and no one would have blamed me for going in that direction. But to me, like, I've done all that, and I don't think in the end it's really like furthering the conversation or helping to set up our industry for survival. You mentioned now that like there's this movement, this push to manufacture things domestically, and that sadly is how our industry reacts. It's like there's no vision when it comes to like how to do things. There's no change until you are forced to change. So having the conversation now about manufacturing things domestically is years late. Like, it's not like you couldn't see the problems with shipping from China coming a mile away. Right. You could. And, when I started getting involved in decision making at FFG, like, I beat that drum so many times, for years. And but the answer is always the same, Jason. It's like, oh, it's just too expensive. Like, the margins are just too bad. Like, we just can't do it. So but if you're willing to accept, like, hey, maybe I just won't make as much on these, and that's okay.
Or make as much this quarter.
Yeah, or whatever.
Right? Yeah, it's like
there's a cost. There's a cost to everything, though. Like, like, even though the monetary cost might be less to go, manufacture in China, there are costs. Like, there's a cost to the environment to make that happen. There's a cost to your time. There's a cost to your peace of mind when you've backed this Kickstarter that's like, stuck on a boat somewhere in customs and you're not going to get it. Like, there's nothing, that makes a consumer, or particularly a gamer, more angry than knowing their game is available and they just can't get it.
Right.
So it avoids all of these things, all the hassle. And then on top of all of it, it's better for the environment, because if I'm shipping to people in the States or on the continent in Canada from a facility here, then that reduces emissions. And hopefully, like I said, like, the materials that go into that production are also all sourced here. So there's just less things moving around going across the globe than there would be otherwise. And then taking those regional manufacturing stretch goals into account, where it's like, hey, if we get enough people in all these different spots in the world, then we can manufacture in different places and serve your, community, larger community, more directly than any other tabletop game ever has. And that I get excited about that. Like that's the thing that's really excited to me. I know if people like look at the Kickstarter, like, oh, okay, well, where it's made, all right, you have to have a certain kind of mindset for that to really, get your fires going. But it would be super impactful. And I think, I know that there are lots of people in the industry watching this Kickstarter with interest and wondering how much people actually care about this kind of thing. And if they're willing to help support it. Because I think that a lot of people in our industry are very forward thinking. They're very progressive. But they oftentimes, kind of like push down their personal feelings on a particular issue, especially in the environment, when they're forced with just needing to hit a certain margin and making sure that they're hitting their targets for their sales and their revenue for the quarter or for the year. But I think if we can show that this works and it can happen and people do care, then they might make different decisions and better decisions that will be better for them and better for the environment, and in the end better for the customer too, because they'll feel good about the thing that they're buying, and they'll also like get it way easier.
We got into the weeds for when it comes to Earthborne. I think people got a value in that. I want to get into just the weeds just a little bit.
Yeah.
Why is it so much more expensive to manufacture locally than it is in China? So I hear like labor. I hear lack of capacity. In terms of, like it takes you can't just do it at any printer. I can't go to Kinko's and print the game. Like there's, or if there is a Kinko's anymore, sorry people.
Yeah. No, we were just at Kinko's printing this game to send it to Team Covenant, so you could technically do it, but it doesn't work. It's not
like mass produce.
Yeah.
So like it takes like.
Oh, I was just gonna say you'll see in the video the quality isn't up to the quality we'll get in the final product, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, and so it takes capacity to get that quality up. It takes capacity to make plastics, to make and not just to make them, but to mass produce them. So like. You hear about this about iPhones. Like, okay, no one in the world knows how to make, how to manufacture iPhones besides China, because they have, the precise types of machines. The labor is trained, and so because allegedly we don't train people here and working these types of machines doing whatever. So like these barriers that people say, like from your perspective, you seem to have a lot of insight on this. How much of all those factors play into why it's so expensive here?
Yeah, well, like you said, the labor's a portion of it. The capacity, not so much. Like there are game manufacturers in the States, and card manufacturers especially. Like the largest one in the world is located here, Cardamundi, and they print Magic. I think a lot of that is printed domestically, and their capacity is enormous. Like there is no game larger than Magic the Gathering. But they have such a ridiculously high volume, and their margins because of that are so insanely good, and they have such a culture around collectability and chase that they're able to charge $25 for a pack of 15 booster cards, or is that 10? I don't know, those collector ones. That it's not a lot.
The secret layers, I think like one of them was like 5 lands for $20. Yeah,
exactly. It's crazy. But people, instead of being angry, they're like, oh, can I get more, please? So they're able to do it because they're so massive. And they just make a ton of money on it and all sorts of other avenues. And it's, it's like their flag, Wizards of the Coast flagship brand apart from D&D. And D&D, I think, also is largely printed, those books, I think, printed in Canada or in the States. So they do a lot of manufacturing here too. But again, like at pretty significant volumes. And book printing is something that is done in the States very frequently. And there's a lot of capacity for that. But so when it comes to board game manufacturing, capacity is not really an issue, especially for a card game. That's not a limiter in as far as like we can do, whether or not we can do it. And it's certainly not a limiter as far as what the expense is.
I hear that a lot of like, because there'll be publishers firing back at the people saying manufacture locally, and then they'll say, we're gonna get lower quality and it's gonna not look as good and it's gonna be more expensive.
That's not true. It can look just as good. Again, Cardamom, like Magic looks great. D&D books look phenomenal. So the quality can absolutely be there. And, the quality of a production is not, it's not as tied to the factory itself as you think it might be. It's tied to the individuals working on that particular print run, and also the quality assurance standards of the publisher. It's not like you can approach production where it's like, here's the game, off it goes, and I guess we'll just wait and it'll come back and it'll be what it is. You can do it that way, but you're not going to get anything good, whether you print in China or you print here. It requires a lot of forethought, a lot of preparation, and a lot of attention to detail from everyone along the process to make a good production of a game. So casting a wide net over there's this expertise in China that's like magical that we can't achieve here is absurd. It really just comes down to,
or it costs a lot to achieve it here.
It does. It's only because the people here make a living wage and are more cared for than a lot of the workers in China who work very, very long hours. They live on campuses, and it's just a completely different culture. So I think, if you want to get into like the social issues of the thing, like I feel like from my perspective, like just growing up, largely in this like the 70s and 80s, there's this stigma attached with manufacturing in the United States where if you work a manufacturing job, you're somehow not achieving your potential, or you're somehow lesser than people who don't work those jobs. But like working in manufacturing and working at factories and helping to build things is incredibly important and takes skill and effort, and takes there are people there are people like me who's my skills are in like using my imagination and making up stories. There are also people who are just really good building things and have great minds for creating physical objects. And I feel like those people in large part are kind of told that their skills are not as meaningful as people who have like cushy jobs or like, high priced lawyers or doctors or something. And I think that's really tragic. And I feel like that I think if we can remove that stigma around manufacturing, and then, making sure that people are treated well, like we don't have to do like industrial age sweatshops where we're like putting children to work and like working people in horrible environments where they're in danger and breathing toxic fumes and all the stuff that has happened for hundreds of years. Treating people well and giving them good jobs in manufacturing, it's incredibly important. I think it'd be really, really good for all of us as a culture and for our economy. So to that point, like I feel like I think bringing manufacturing to the United States is important to help support that, because it supports local communities, supports those workers who work in those factories and their families, and I think that's good. So in addition to helping the environment, if we get these regional manufacturing things done, you're supporting the economy of your region, and it is very, very important.
So we could do it. Is the bottom line.
We can do it. Yeah, there's nothing like it's just a question of do I want to spend more price per unit on this or not? And 9 times out of 10 with most of the decision makers, that answer is not.
Right. 99 times out of 100.
Sure, fair enough. But I think there are some things that are more challenging. Like if you want to do like a bunch of miniatures, you need to really do a lot of legwork to try to like do tooling and plastic injection in the United States, and then try to find a factory that's willing to do it. trying to get in, like, you know, they exist, but like trying to get them on board to do it might be harder. And it's just about educating those factories and facilities. So, you know, while I say there's a lot of like game manufacturers here, I also know there's a ton of green printers here who do like all sorts of really phenomenal packaging materials, all sorts of stuff super sustainably with alternate papers, you know, using like solar power. They have missions all about like manufacturing and printing green. But they might not have games in their portfolio, but that doesn't mean they can't do it. Like, it's a box and some cards and a sheet of punch board. It's about as dirt simple as you can possibly get when it comes to production.
Mm-hmm.
So, I am talking to, like, you know, experienced game manufacturers, but you know, there's also an opportunity potentially to, you know, to coach up other really qualified printers to do something new and amazing that, you know, maybe this haven't been given the opportunity. So yeah, we can absolutely do it, and we can do it all over the place. It's just a question of, you know, me deciding to say, all right, well, I'm fine paying more per unit. I'm fine making a little bit less, or a lot a bit less. I did my calculation on the margins the other day. They're not awesome. But yeah, but to me, that mission is important, and it's more important than the short-term monetary gain.
But people are it's hitting their margins now because the containers from China have, you know, quintupled in price,
Mm-hmm.
right? What used to cost like a couple K to ship over now costs like 15K.
More.
Same thing. The same pallet, the same, you know, situation. It just
it's
right.
It's over 20 now.
Right.
Yeah, 22 is the last number I heard on a container.
And so you're gonna have those margins anyway. So like when things are blue sky, when things are going, and they were for a while, like, you know, like we tend to forget, like when things go really well, you know, but that now we're understanding that things don't go well all the time. You know, good luck finding a car. And why is there a car shortage? That's actually a very, very specific thing. Like, because there's a part of the car called the semiconductor that needs to be in every car, and they're only manufactured in one place. So like if we had the capacity to manufacture it here, we wouldn't be encountering the kind of things that we're encountering. But it's like, it's not really it's a capacity issue. It's an infrastructure issue. We can realign these things is the overall message.
Correct.
And not only so there's two aspects to it, right? That we can, and then there's the aspect where we should for environmental reasons, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think like the environmental reasons obviously are to support, you know, manufacturers that are moving in that direction, and, you know, encourage them. The more business that we can give them, the better they'll do, the cheaper they'll become over time. And then, you know, then like obviously the cutting down on emissions by being able to ship most of the stuff like domestically or, you know, whatever region, like that's very good. But then the other portion of it is are the materials, and that is what I'm finding to be, you know, the largest challenge. And the quotes that I've gotten are all like at varying levels of environmentally friendly. Like you asked at the beginning, like, are these board games good for the environment? Well, the short answer, no, they're not. But, you know, like, I think we give ourselves a pass because, you know, in the grand scheme of things, as far as like consumer products go, it's a pretty small portion of it. But I feel like, you know, doing your part as a small portion of that consumer goods segment is important. So the materials that the games are made of, like being FSC compliant, is something that's pretty easy to achieve. So that's like the Forest Stewardship Council. They give their seal of approval to tree farms that are grown in a specific way, and harvested in a specific way, and then replanted in a way where there's more trees growing than you are harvesting. Essentially, is that the equation in the simplest terms. So getting that compliance on the paper that we use is not difficult. It's just a little bit more money to make that happen. Making those components then recyclable or biodegradable, that's the larger challenge. So, you know, most of the products that you see, and like most of the stuff that's on your shelf, be they boxes or the punchboard sheets or the cards or the reference sheets, you might think, sure, I can just put this stuff in the recycling. It's paper. That's wrong. It's all coated in plastic. Anytime you like heavily coat paper in plastic, it ruins its recyclability.
Yeah, we call it linen finish. You know, we
the,
love
the,
that.
The linen finish is the texture.
Okay.
It's not the plastic. So
That's
like,
got it.
Yeah. So like most card components like have some level of plastic on it. So like, Magic cards, a great example. They've been doing a good job lately of like labeling all their packaging with all the things that are recyclable and not. And you'll note that the cards are not noted there as something that you can recycle. And the reason is for a couple reasons. Like one, they're coated in plastic. Two, anytime you have a lot of adhesive on a card or any paper, that also ruins the recyclability. So it's imagine like at the recycling centers, they just dump all the paper into like a vat. Again, I'm oversimplifying. Dump it all to a vat, gets churned around, like turns into a pulp, and then they are able to then process then to do recycled paper. But if you're throwing in there a bunch of cards coated in plastic, it just gets all gummy and gross, and you can't actually do anything with it. So so the Magic cards, in addition to having that plastic on them, there's the like what you've heard of, I'm sure, black core cards, like they're really like high quality, like playing card. That core is an adhesive that holds together two thin sheets of paper, and it's squashed, and then that creates your card. So if you imagine like, hey, if I say to make paper more recyclable, you can't have very much adhesive. If your adhesive goes top to bottom every inch of paper on that card, then it is no longer recyclable whatsoever, and there's really nothing you can do about it.
If people black core cards, that it's often a stretch goal. We're going to make the card better. Yeah,
because they're really expensive. Again, like that's the point. Is like it's this high quality. And they feel nice. They have like a good like responsiveness to them. They have a good flick to them. Like everything about them feels good.
Yeah, you're a card man, right? You appreciate the feel of a good card.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the bigger challenges is like what to do with the card stock and what concessions am I willing to make to have a high quality product that is environmentally sustainable as possible. And I think that's the words "as possible" are very important to everything that we're doing, where our goal is to make everything like 100% sustainable, top to bottom, recyclable, compostable. Like you have those board games back there, like you might want them on your shelf. Your sons or daughters might want them on their shelf. Will their grandchildren? Will theirs, et cetera, et cetera. At some point, that thing's probably going to end up in the ground, like down the road in the distant future. So that's really the kind of the view that I'm trying to take is like, we have these really cool artifacts that we create, but do we really want them to exist for all time, forever, and never decompose or leach, microplastics into the soil? Essentially do all the things that all the stuff in the landfill is eventually going to do, and like all the plastic in the ocean, and it's all going to end up in the dirt eventually. Like nothing that we build lasts forever. You can just ask the Romans. So that's the view I'm taking, which is a crazy long view to take, but I think it's important. And so that's the goal for our products, is that they'll eventually get to that point. But I'm fully aware that we might not be there yet. Like that's the goal. But for this production, like we might not be able to go as far as I want to go. And trying to determine like where that line sits and what is possible versus what is ridiculous. And what's going to get you a good product. Because like I could definitely get you like a fully biodegradable product. But at the end, like, is that card stock going to be good enough? Is that card stock going to feel right? Are you going to is it going to feel like that high quality game you expect to receive? That's really important. So if I can't achieve all of that, then there's going to have to be some concessions made. And part of what I'm doing or will be doing after the conclusion of the Kickstarter, as we go into this process of like, all right, now we're going to make this thing, is try to bring everyone along for that journey and share the story of getting the game made, and then talking very explicitly about the decisions that I'm making and educating along the way. So if we can't hit it 100% this time, that we will next time, or we'll try to continually raise the bar, because any progress is good.
Or like you'll spur some innovation, like someone will have an idea, because that's what's going to get us through. You know, we like in terms of making the future of Earthborne Rangers, that has to come from innovation. Right. It isn't going to come from like, okay, it just happens. People are going to have to like get together and like figure stuff out. Like and who knows, like we get very negative about it, or like we kind of outsource it to like the geniuses. Right. Jeff Bezos will save us. He'll bring all the like the stuff into space and like that. And I think he even talked about that. Like we're going to make all like gas emitting things into space. Like, I don't know if I want to rely on you. Like they are the innovators and the rest of us are kind of like receiving. Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the mindset we've gotten into.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are local, like you're talking about the green printers. That's just people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're local and they just have a vision. They're like, they like, okay, we're going to figure out how to make biodegradable cards.
Yeah.
Which those don't exist right now, really, like really good ones that we're used to, but we're right.
Well, so that's one thing that I need to figure out is like, what's the toxicity level of that adhesive on the black core cards? Could that be made less toxic and still be just as powerful as an adhesive? Because it's like, it's a really powerful adhesive, right? You can't even, it's indistinguishable as a glue. Can that be made in a way that would biodegrade, right? Because if the cards, because I already know we can do a biolaminate finish that's just as good as like a UV coating, like that's easy. So like getting rid of that plastic coating, that's no problem. Like there's a way to do that that'll feel like plastic, but isn't petrochemical. So it'll be able to biodegrade. But if that adhesive that holds black core cards together, if that can break down in a way that's not detrimental to the environment, I feel like I can live with that. Like you can say, yeah, it's not recyclable, but you can put it in your compost heap. You can bury it in the ground. If you don't want this anymore, you can shovel it in the dirt and everything will be fine. I can live with that. So, so we'll see. Like part of what I really wanted to happen with this Kickstarter is for it to reach people who knew more than I did about how this works. And already that's working. Like someone reached out to me just the other day from a research scientist at the University of Minnesota who studies sustainability, and like that's like everything that he's doing. So he's like, hey, I really want to talk to you about what you're doing. So it's like, yes, of course, let's talk. And then someone else in the comments pointed to another company. Oh man, I wish I closed all my tabs. Another company that did a game recently that was about I think about hiking in Tibet, and Treacer, I think there might be a company in the Netherlands or Switzerland or something, but their mission is the same as ours, like that they're making games sustainably. And I had never heard of them. So now I have. So like now I have a email composed in my drafts, like you're reaching out to them to benefit from, see if I can benefit from their knowledge and experience. So I feel like, that's my biggest hope, I think, from this is that, that my knowledge will grow, but then also there'll be enough awareness raised where people will reach out to me and offer their help and their expertise. Because I know way more. I've been talking for like 20 minutes. I know way more than I used to know. But I'm certainly no expert. I'll know way more even next year by the time the thing's made. So so yeah, the more people who can help out and offer and lend their expertise, the better.
Well, this stuff is very fascinating to me. Okay, good. Fish.
Oh no, I was just going to say that the beauty of this is it's not like this is a first step, and this isn't like a competitive game, right? Like it is, it's a co-op game. It's the more other companies that like jump onto this, who show interest in this and help make these connections, honestly, the easier it will be to keep pushing this, and the cheaper it'll get.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Like this is something like somebody needs to take the first step, and we're trying to take that first step. Our first step will be imperfect, but ideally it is opening up like more perfect and better and cheaper versions of this sustainable technology for the board game industry for lots of people in the future.
And on my side, as press, I'd love to continue these conversations. The people that are reaching out to you, reach out to me too. Come, let's be on this show. And I'm growing my my audience, and my audience is about like diversity, inclusion, and social justice stuff. Like this is a justice issue too. Like local manufacturing, like more jobs, please. More jobs doing interesting things, not just like going to the local Walmart or Target, like working at these places. You're innovating. These are centers of innovation. So like, that's what we want. We don't want the brainless job down the block, with the big mega store. Like what we want is we want to encourage smaller businesses, and that helps in diversity inclusion. And it helps the worker. And I'm a huge, fan of the worker. And I think it's like we're trying to accomplish, like what Fish was saying, a big co-op game. Like these can be win-win-win-win if we're willing to kind of sink in the amount of investment and resource and time and money and all that kind of thing. So absolutely. Yeah, please. I would like to continue these conversations on shelf stories. Absolutely. And even if it gets wonky, which is, I kind of like the wonk. I don't understand it all, but like eventually I think you might be in the same boat where it's like, I don't understand quite what you're saying, but I like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we talk about it more, it'll process more, right? So absolutely, this is you're doing the first things, and believe me, I'd like to play my own role and like getting the word out about this stuff, because it is important. Like local stuff, local businesses. It's just everybody wins. We really do. All right. So yeah, we have gone a while.
We have.
I think I need to get back to my wife upstairs. But Earthborne Rangers is the project on Kickstarter. Earthborne Games is the company. Is every game from Earthborne going to be Earthborne something? Are you going to release Earthborne cars and Earthborne? No.
No. So the games that are set like in this like kind of core Earthborne world will have Earthborne in the title. But no, it is I already have plans for other things. So yeah, we'll do more that's not strictly in universe.
Right. And Fish, it's upcoming things for you. Like, is this, I imagine that you have other projects in the hopper, or is this kind of getting your energy?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're in the middle of a Kickstarter right now. This is taking like probably more than 100% of my energy and time, just focusing on this project right now. We also the team I worked with before this project. We are releasing Descent: Legends of the Dark is coming out in just a couple weeks. So both Andrew and I we're pretty big parts of that project as well. Yeah. So that is coming up as well. But right now, my time and energy is all Earthborne Rangers all the time.
Andrew Navaro, Andrew Fisher, thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you, Jason.
If you can change your mind, it can change the world. So until next time, later, everybody.